This is the third Sunday of Lent for the year 2026. And this third Sunday, this week that we're going into, encompasses roughly the last 20 days of Jesus' life. And in this week, he begins his deliberate last journey to Jerusalem in order to observe his last Passover on earth. He heals the blind man named Bartimaeus near Jericho. He visits Zacchaeus. And as the crowds go larger, he teaches what will be his last parable to teach, the parable of what Matthew calls the 10 talents and what Luke calls the 10 minas. Have you ever wondered why the dates for Easter always change? Well, it's because it's based on the lunar calendar, which is what a lot of the world used for a long, long time before the Romanized calendar was adopted. And so Passover, Easter, revolves around the moon and the spring equinox. Roughly, that is how we determine Easter. And because our calendar came later, some of the events around Jesus' life and his death and the dates and times, it's rather murky. So when people use dates and times to dissuade your belief or to push you away from believing the Bible, it's okay. Let them think that way because the calendar's based on the moon, not the sun. So the parable of the 10 minas or 10 talents is found both in Matthew and Luke, and both tell the story slightly different from the main character and how much of, let's just say, money versus talents or minas, how much money is given and received and how much money is given to each person. So it's a little bit different, but it's the same story with the same meaning. So a ruler, rich or royalty, goes on a journey. And before he goes on that journey, he gives his servants, his workers, a sum of money in order to do something with it. He tells them that when he comes back, he'll have to give an account of what they did with that money. And so he takes off on the journey. He's gone for a while, and then he comes back. And in Matthew, 10 times of the money is given to one and then less to others. And we only see about 3 people in that story. With Luke, the money is distributed evenly among 10 people. And so in both, one invests the money, others do the same in different varying degrees. And then there's one who does nothing with it but buries it or hides it. So when the ruler returns, each has to give their account. One makes a lot of money and in turn receives a reward of a lot of money. One makes some money, so in return receives some money. And the one who all they did was hide their money or bury their money makes a lame excuse as to why in both stories. But we know that they're punished to differing degrees, but they're punished. Parables, or the stories that Jesus told, parables can mean different things to different people. And I know that sounds strange. We should be able to read one passage and walk away with the same meaning. But sometimes the way Jesus told the story is he told it in a way that we would have to think about it. And I think that's what a lot of people miss when they read the Bible and read what Jesus was trying to teach. Because a lot of times he says, well, what do you think about this? Jesus is wanting us to think about the things that he is teaching. Because when we think about them, we will have more buy-in. We will care about it more. When we have thought about it and made a decision, that's when we are true followers and not just robots. And I think a lot of churches want you to be a robot because they can control you. They can control you and they can control your bank account. And so we as humans, we filter the parables based on who we are, how we grew up, how we were taught this originally, whether it was in a fundamental Baptist church or a Pentecostal church. Each has their own little twist, their own little cultural norms that they throw into this, into parables. And so what happens is we all come away, rightly so, with a different meaning, with the hopes that it impacts us and changes our lives. So with this particular parable, some of you have been taught that, especially in Matthew, when he uses the word talents, which is a form of money, it's a weight of silver, that was actually a euphemism or a metaphor for talents like preaching or singing or teaching. And people will teach you that this whole story is a metaphor for using our talents for the kingdom of God. And so if we use the talents that God gave us abundantly, then he will give us an abundant reward for using those talents. If we don't use our talents, he will punish you or not give you a reward, depending on how you see that last servant. And that point of view is probably sound. It's okay that you take away from that. And also, I think we get wrapped around the axle on the math and the money. So the one who got 10 in Matthew gets 10, and the one who gets 1 in Luke gets 10. And I think the ratio of reward to work gets messed up in our heads sometimes and messed up in how we teach it. And I think we get wrapped around the axle on that. We miss the point quite often. And some will take away that this is really about money. The more we give to the church, the more we get from Jesus. So there's that. If you take away the ideas of money and talents like singing or preaching and teaching, and you boil it down to the base of what Jesus is trying to teach, I think it makes more sense. And then it helps you understand that regardless of how much money or how many servants there were, or if it was a prince or just a rich person, and how long they were gone on the journey, it doesn't matter. What matters is what Jesus is trying to teach. And so here's what I believe Jesus is trying to teach. And what he's trying to teach is if a person lives like the first servant or person did, it's good for that person to live that way. And that person will be blessed and good things will happen to that person. But if a person lives like the one who hid the money and did nothing with it, then that person is going to experience bad things. So if you live and think like the first person, then good things will happen to you. And when you die, even better things will happen to you. And if you live like the last person who hid the money, then good things probably won't happen to you. And then when you die, something bad will happen to you. And that's the punishment that we see kind of in Luke. And I know that sounds like an oversimplification, but if we get to the root of what Jesus is trying to teach us, he's trying to teach us to live like the first person. He wants us to think and live like that person, to take what God gives us and put it to use for God. And when that happens, good things will happen to it. And then he wants us to know that living like the person who hid the money, living like that person and thinking like that person is not good. And good things won't happen to us. And so that's the root teaching. And I think what Jesus did is he read the room, he knew the audience, and so he added some spice to that soup and made it taste a little bit better, made that medicine taste better when it was going down. And he added those parts of the story to make us think about it more and to hear it better and to understand it and own it more. Versus if he just said, hey, do good and good things will happen to you, we probably wouldn't have listened as well. So he told us this story with some spice, with some intrigue, with some bad things and good things happening to people in order for us to understand what it is he was trying to teach us. And he's trying to teach us that that's what happens in the kingdom of heaven. And so I think what I would ask is that this third week of Lent, that we reflect on this lesson, reflect on the things Jesus taught us, and we endeavor to live like the first person. Because when we live like that and think like that, it's good for us. Grace and peace to you. God bless you. Have a great week.